Hi class, this is Professor Carlo and today I will be discussing the principles of interviewing. I know that I have already discussed this online on Microsoft Teams, but I'll be making this more accessible for everybody. So please watch this on YouTube, okay, so that you would learn more. So the course objectives of this presentation are the following. At the end of this presentation, these are the skills that are expected of you. So you can explain how to define interview goals, identify and analyze the other interview party, and choose the best interview structure. You can also show skills on how to demonstrate knowledge of the uses and limitation of each type of interview question, the primary, secondary, closed, open, factual, opinion, direct, indirect, hypothetical, and critical incident. You can also do the following: describe the purpose of an appropriate conduct during each stage of an interview, such as opening, body, and conclusion stage. Describe features and common uses of various types of employment interviews and explain ways to prepare for each. Lastly, you can also show a skill on on describing and observing the ethical obligations of interviewers and interviewees. Now, just to show you an overview of this presentation, we will be discussing the following. First, interviewing strategies. So, how would you strategize your interview before attending your scheduled interview? What are the strategies that you can employ during the actual interview? What are the employment interview? What are the types of interviews? Also, the ethical considerations of interviewing. What are your obligations as interviewer and interviewee? All of these will be discussed on the following slides. Now, before anything else, I'd like you to understand that there are common characteristics of interview, and this would guide you as we go along. So first, interview is something planned. It's a planned communication. Of course, interview is something scheduled. You have already prepared yourself on the possible questions that will be asked during interview. So it's actually a planned conversation. It's something that you need to prepare for. Next, interviews always involve two parties. So the company and yourself as the applicant, and both parties have its own roles to play. Third, interviewing is always purposeful. So you came for an interview because you'd like to land a job, and that is the ultimate purpose. On the other hand, the ultimate purpose of the interviewer is to employ or hire the best candidate suitable for the position. Next, there is actually a focus on asking and answering questions. Yes. Um, So the interviewer will not just be asking random questions. The interviewer has selected purposive questions during the actual interview. These questions could be about your educational attainment, your achievements, your working experience. So asking, answering questions has focus. Interviews are more structured than most conversation. Yes, compared to a typical conversation, like a friendly conversation with a random strangers, it's actually um, a, f- a f- it's actually a free conversation, or shall we say, both interlocutors or both speakers are liberalized or has freedom on what topics to tell in a conversation. Compared with interviews, it's very formal, so it has to undergo a structure such as introducing yourself, asking major questions, and of course, ending the conversation. Next, interviews also have an element of control, especially in the role of the interviewer. You have to control um, the conversation because you have a time, no? At the end of the day, your goal is to interview all of the candidates and select which among these candidates are the suitable ones for the job. So you have to really manage your time, and so you can just allot maybe 10 to 15 minutes interview time for per candidate. So this is how you would control um, and manage your time as interviewer. On the other hand, you can also control how the conversation would go. So if you think that the applicant does not make any sense, you can just interrupt and lead him or her to another question. And that's how we can control a conversation. Next, interviews ought to be distributed in roughly a 70 to 30% ratio. Yes, this is right. It's like teacher-student ratio that applicant or student has to explain more than the teacher or the interviewer. All right, moving forward, we now have interviewing strategies, and there are two. What are the planning strategies in the interview, and what are the strategies that you can employ during the actual interview? So first, we will be exploring the strategies in planning the interview. So first is to define your goal as interviewer or as interviewee. You really need to understand your role here. In the first place, your role as interviewer is to employ, to actually meet the goal of the business, which is to deploy people for the company. On the other hand, the role of the interview is to land the job. So that's your ultimate goal. So first, you really have to understand both roles that you have to play here. And that is part of the planning stage. Next, identify and analyze potential interviewer or interviewee. So as interviewer, you have already screened your possible or your candidates or your applicants, and that is part of identifying and analyzing potential interviewees. You can just think of the potential personalities that your interviewees would have during the interview. There could be energetic interviewee, there could be a talkative interviewee, there could be a shy interviewee. So you have to really prepare yourself as interviewer, and you have to mediate or position yourself um, in relation to the styles or character of your interviewee. Next, prepare a list of topics to ask. So before you come to an interview, before you attend an interview and your role is as interviewer, of course you have to prepare what are the possible topics that you should be asking in the interview. You could ask about the background, the working experience, the achievements. In that case, you can frame the competence, the knowledge, or the skills of your applicant. Next, choose the best interview structure. So we actually have different interview structures. Um, so these are the interview structures that we have. We have a structured interview in which it consists of a standardized list of questions that allow only a limited range of answers with no follow-up questions. So basically, you already have a list of questions to ask, okay, and you should not include any questions that are not on the list, and that is structured questions. Whatever's on the list, those are the questions that you should ask, and that is structured interview. Next, semi-structured interview is the interviewer prepares a list of topics, anticipates their probable order, and designs major questions and possible follow-up probes. So in this case, to some extent, the interviewer has freedom to ask follow-up questions, primarily to probe the skill or knowledge of the applicant. So not necessarily you have to follow all the questions on the list, but you can also think of other questions that you think should be asked during the interview. Lastly, another type of interview structure is that it is unstructured interview. Basically, you don't follow anything. You don't follow any guides. You just think of questions on the spot, and that is unstructured interview. So after choosing the best interview structure, we will now consider possible questions. Questions about knowledge, questions about skills, questions about competency. We have here types of interview questions, questions that you can ask during the interview. We have closed-ended, so basically it is answerable by yes or no. For example, do you have pending applications with other companies? Yes, I do. Or no, I don't. So that is closed-ended question. Next, open-ended question. It requires the applicant to explain or elaborate his or her answer. For example, how did you know about our company? In this question, the applicant has to explain or has to describe um, the way on how he knew about the company or the business. Next, hypothetical questions. Uh, excuse me. Um, the last three questions are actually very typical during the interview. The close-ended questions are just asked after gathering pertinent data about the applicant. So you would experience more of these questions during the interview, or you should experience most of these questions during the interview. Now, hypothetical is a condition. A conditional question that if you're given a chance to receive 1 million, what will you do? Or if you will be hired in this job, how would you manage to spend your first salary? Okay, so those are hypothetical questions. Critical questions, on the other hand, aside from it makes you really critically think, it would allow you to go beyond or think out of the box. For example, can you recall a time when you did a collaborative task? What was the task all about, and how did you accomplish the task? What were the challenges you encountered, and how did you handle it? So basically, you are narrating a story here, and that would reflect who you are as a person, who you are as a worker or an employee. So after considering possible questions, we'll now move to arranging the setting. And arranging the setting is very important because this would create a mood between you as interviewer and your interviewee. So as much as possible, make the setting as formal as also at the same time quiet, so that the applicant can uh, feel relaxed, at the same time focus on the questions asked. All right, so after planning the interview, you will now be conducting. So imagine yourself um, in a room or interview room, and you will be asked questions, or you are the interviewee, and so you have to follow these stages. And this is the structure of the interview. So it has opening, a middle, and closing or ending. So basically, it's just a story. You know? Interview is like narrating your own story. What's with your story that make you very suitable for the job? Okay. So what happened? This is when you would greet and build rapport. For example, how's your day so far? I hope you didn't wait too long for this interview. Okay. Make sure that you also have a friendly tone. Next, orientation. In this stage, you have to at least orient your applicant on what to expect on this interview. Perhaps you can set expectations such as, I will be asking you series of questions and please answer to the best of your experience or knowledge. And this interview will just last 10 minutes, something like that. And that is a setting of expectation, or in other words, orienting your applicant. Next, motivation. This is when you make your applicant feel at least at ease during the conversation or formal conversation. So you could at least motivate your applicant in a way that he or she would feel that um, she's already in the critical stage, and so um, don't worry. You'll get the best out of this, something like that, something that would motivate your applicant. Moving forward, we're now at the body stage. So you have to know the responsibilities or your roles as interviewer and interviewee. So first responsibility of the interviewer is that you have to control and focus the conversation. So you have the sense of controlling the conversation. You have to manage the time, and that is your role. Listen actively because if you don't listen, you won't be able to assess whether the applicant is suitable for the job. Okay. In a way, listening actively to the answers or responses of the applicant would frame your assessment or evaluation. Next, use secondary questions to probe for important information. Um, if you're not satisfied with the first response or the way the applicant answer the question, you can do the following. You could ask them to repeat the answer. You could ask them to elaborate their answer. You could ask them to clarify their answer. Perhaps you're confused about the response, so you can ask them to clarify it, or you can also ask them to paraphrase it. Um, Also, silence and prods um, would actually mean that you are listening at the same time you are understanding what the applicant is trying to imply. Next, on the red color responsibilities of interviewee. So as an interview, you have to listen actively and give clear and detailed answers. Answer the questions that interviewer has asked. Correct any misunderstandings and cover your own agenda. So, as interviewee, you are also have the freedom to ask questions, perhaps about um, the location, the salary, typically relating to the job that you're applying for. Okay. Next, conducting the interview. This is the closing stage. So we're now at the end of the actual interview. So these are the strategies. Review and clarify the results of the interview, establish future actions, and conclude with a pleasantry. So how would you do this? So first, um, you can do a quick recap or a quick summary of the things that you have talked about during the interview. So that is the review and clarification. Establish future actions. You can set expectation towards the applicant that he or she will be receiving a phone call, asking them to submit necessary documents for their employment, and conclude with pleasantries like shaking hands is actually a pleasant way to express yourself, a formal way to express yourself to the applicant. All right, so the ethics of interviewing. I won't be discussing this in detail because we have already discussed this in class, the ethics, um, and this boils down to your behavior, to your morale. Okay, but just for the sake of this a video, I'll be going through the content of the slide. So the obligations of the interviewer are the following: make only promises you are willing and able to keep. You know, I hate recruiters who actually make promises that they don't keep, such as they would tell you that you will be receiving a phone call, but you will not, or making promises such as you'll be receiving 50,000, but after 2 months of working, you never receive 50K. So those are the things meant by number one. Second, keep confidences. Whatever you talked about before, during, or after the interview, make sure that you keep it as confidential as possible. Third, allow the interviewee to make free responses. And fourth, treat every interviewee with respect. All right, obligations of interviewee. Don't misrepresent the facts or your position. So don't provide any false information about yourself. Make sure that whatever is written on your resume or your curriculum vitae are all correct. Don't waste the interviewer's time. Yeah, in the first place, if you're not if you're not interested with a job, don't consume resources. Don't print resume if you won't be coming to the interview. All right, so we are now discussing the midterm requirement, and your requirement is to conduct a video interview. And this is to respond to our current situation. I mean, the lockdown is it's making us very stressful. I mean, our mental state is becoming crazy, and so we have to really respond to the situation that we have now. And so for us to be able to move forward, I have thought of instead of doing actual interviews in the class, which we cannot do, I'm thinking of doing a video interviews. So how would you do this? So first, these are the things that you have to plan. So confirm the date and time of your interview in advance. I have already sent an Excel file which consists a list of students, and a list of students that shows your role as interviewer and interviewee. So for example, I'll be interviewing Justin. So I will contact Justin and set a schedule of when he will be available for an interview. Okay. Send any necessary background materials before the interview. Yes. These necessary documents are the following: resume, cover letter, and a job ad. So I expect that you have knowledge about writing resume. Cover letter is actually um, a basic letter which is included in the ebook. Okay, and job ad, just go online, jobstreet.com, look for a job, um, capture it or yeah, um, print screen it, and then paste in a Word document and send it or attach it to your resume. It means that this is the job that you're applying for. Next, test your equipment well in advance and again shortly before the interview. So you check your internet connections, you check your speaker, you check your laptop, and other equipments that are necessary for this activity. Arrange an alternative way of contacting the other party in case you need to communicate while establishing a connection. So we can use Microsoft Teams because MS Team has a feature that would enable you to record the interview. So you have to really record it so that I can assess something. You can also use other platforms such as Skype. If Facebook Messenger has a feature to record the video, then you can also use that. Next, during the interview, so what happens during the interview? You have to make sure the field of vision your webcam picks up is clean and neat. We won't be using a webcam really. Um, a speaker would be fine. Okay, audio interview would be fine for as long as you record it. Be aware that the microphone picks up background noise as well as your voice. Try to choose a quiet setting and don't tap your pen or shuffle papers. Yeah, this might distract your interviewer or your interviewee. So make sure that you're in a setting where everybody can relax at the same time everybody can um, focus. Plan on a shorter interview than you might have if you were in a face-to-face setting. So you have to really plan this interview. What are the questions that you should ask in the interview? You have to really manage your time. So I'm thinking of a 5 to 10 minute video interview. So these are the procedures on how to really carry out this performance task. So first, you have to check the interviewer applicant matching on Excel and their submission schedule. After knowing your interviewer and your interviewee, ask for their email address and send a copy of your latest resume, cover letter, and a job ad drawn gathered from JobStreet so that they will have time to review your profile. Yes, so you have to submit your documents first so that the interview would have time to review your profile and understand the job or the position that you're applying for. In that case, they can tailor fit the questions. Arrange your own interview schedule so you can contact your partner in advance and arrange a particular schedule. It could be in the morning or in the afternoon. Interviewers will contact the assigned applicants and conduct an interview. Use Microsoft Teams for video interview, record the interview, and submit the recorded video to the professor for evaluation. Yes, this is very important, class. Make sure that you all record your interview. If you don't record, I have nothing to assess. Hence, no grade. No more than 20 minutes video interview. Make sure that you follow the principles in interviewing. I guess we can do 10 to 20 minute interview. Okay. Familiarize yourself on the rubric or interview evaluation form to assess your applicant. This is another task, and this is a job of the interviewer. Make sure that you also assess the skills of the applicant. And I have already sent a copy of the rubric via Teams. Make sure that you accomplish the two roles. You have interviewed an applicant, and at the same time you have been interviewed as an applicant. So there are two roles. Each student has to interview one, and that student has to be an applicant as well. All right, so there should be two roles that you have to portray here: interviewer and interviewee. Your midterm performance task is evaluated in the perspective of interviewer, while the applicant performance will be part of your um, performance task. Okay, so if you have questions, just message me. You know my Microsoft Teams account, or you can email me. Please like this video, and you can also subscribe to my channel.